Welcome to Global Change Agents, the show where some of the world's most influential women across business, technology and academia will discuss how they're bringing about radical change in their industries and beyond. Joining me today is Marta Krupinska, Head of Google for Startups UK, the search giant startup incubator. On today's show, we'll be discussing the lessons she learned as a serial tech entrepreneur. And we got the skinny on what's coming up next for Google for Startups and what's in it for Google. So Marta, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. You've had a very storied journey in the world of tech, but before we get into that, I'd love to go right back to the beginning and ask you, what was your earliest memory when it came to technology?
As probably any sort of mid-millennial, I'm sort of born in the late 80s, I think computers was one of those things that we all sort of aspired to have. I remember my first mobile phone, it being a big thing. I remember when we first got dial-up internet. And I think it's a myth that we all have to be real techies in the early days to be able to achieve something in tech. Probably the first profound memory is when I was 12 and I sent an email to AJ from Backstreet Boys wishing him happy birthday. And it was a really big thing for me and he never replied. When I was...
Someone needs to make that happen.
Somebody needs to make that happen. I think it might be a little bit too late. But, you know, when I was 17 or 18, I remember discovering YouTube and finding it absolutely astounding that I don't have to wait up on MTV. And like, I think it's sort of, it was just incredible awe of, oh my God, there are these things that my parents didn't have, other people didn't have, and now are creating all these opportunities.
So what was the moment or a kind of, I suppose, period in your life where you decided to go all in the technology sector?
I don't think there was such a decision. I think in a lot of ways, you know, I sort of serendipitously fell into my first project, which was back when I was 19, and my best friend came over back from his winter holidays and said that he'd like to go on a trip around the world, and we were figuring out how one could go about organizing that. And then we sort of realized that there are those websites and things, and maybe we could do something on the internet. But it was very much more sort of wanting to build something and seeing technology and the internet as a tool rather than thinking, how about we go into tech because that sounds cool.
Well, I mean, like, yeah. But it was really cool pre-Facebook, without all these kind of really, I suppose, granular social media. You built if you can talk about it, built a company that was all around traveling and expats and all this amazing stuff. Yeah. How did you get that ideation from inspiration from your friend off the ground into a company?
Yeah, I mean, we built it together, and very weirdly, after we wrapped up this project, Ariel went on to work at Google. So I feel like him and I, we both have these sort of entrepreneurial journeys that weirdly intertwine with Google. Yes, we figured that we will try and connect with other people around the world who would want to go traveling. And we didn't know the word startup. We didn't know the word social media. I remember a SaaS platform called Social Engine that was licensing essentially a sort of off-the-shelf social media platforms that they all looked exactly like Facebook, and then you just reskinned it to look like whatever you wanted it to be. And they found our projects incredible, and they put it on their homepage to feature as, you know, oh, look, social media is going to be big. Look at these great projects popping up worldwide. But it was very much, you know, it came from the passion for the project. It very much came from this attitude of, you know, what's going to happen if we set off to build that. And very weirdly, you know, we were a bunch of kids, 19-year-olds, you know, building it overnight, you know, in my friend's place, and sort of a year later, when we launched it, we soon after became the most often visited website in travel category in Poland, and then in Central Eastern Europe, and then we started picking up some traffic in America and Canada and Africa. So it was all a bit bonkers. We had no idea what we were doing.
Well, you did it at such a young age, and that's a huge accomplishment already. But what would you say were the biggest lessons that you learned on that first, well, let's say project, but it was a huge company. Like, what was the biggest takeaways from it?
Well, do one thing and do it really well. So we managed to get a lot of traffic indeed and a lot of customers, but we didn't know how to make money off it, and we went bust before we managed to make our first proper dollar. And I think a lot of what I've learned from that is that you need to plan your business activity really well. You need to know where your revenue is going to come from, and you need to secure it for the future, because as much as it has been a successful project, it has not become a successful company. And I think it's probably thanks to those early experiences that I've then, very fortunately, I went on to build things that were more successful than that.
Well, I'd love to pick up on that in a little bit when we start talking about Google for Startups. But before even that, we've got Azimo, which was a company that you co-founded in 2012. So in terms of those lessons applied, what did you do differently when it came to founding that company?
So what I always say is that I have been incredibly lucky when it comes to finding and meeting the right people throughout my journey. So my co-founders are fantastic business people that came with a lot of experience in financial services that I was lacking. And what I was proud of is that I did bring the sort of the internet and social element to it. Plus, I am a migrant. I moved to this country. I'm Polish. I moved to this country in 2012. I actually moved here from New York City, where I also briefly lived. And that sort of those profound experiences of, building this for myself. I said, in a sense, the way TravelNeti, my first project, was built for my friend that wanted to go on a trip around the world. I could very much find myself in Azimo, and we were building it for ourselves. So one thing that Azimo certainly was and is, it's doing one thing incredibly well. It gives people access to sending money internationally from 26 countries in Europe to anywhere in the world. And it does that one thing incredibly well and takes great care of its customers. And obviously, it's a sound business model.
So on the business model side, Azimo actually raised $70 million. One of the trends that has been coming up and up again is that women founders find it the hardest and actually get least success in getting that funding from different companies. Azimo has 2 other male co-founders. So would you say that that's getting any better within the industry? Do you think there's still like a gender gap when it comes to finding that funding? I know that some people that we have talked to as well have previously said they've purposely got men on their boards or put them up front, so it's more likely that they'll get cash. What do you think?
I mean, I think data speaks for itself, and we know that there is a funding gap in this country and in others. When I first started talking about this problem in 2015, sort of data was pointing to 5 to 8% of VC professionals being women. Now the situation has improved, so sort of the latest data shows that around a quarter of VC professionals in the UK are women, but when you actually dig deeper and you think about who has the decision-making powers, you'll find that it's only 13% of partners or senior partners that are women. And I guess that's progress, and obviously that's encouraging, but would I say that it's enough? Probably not, especially as we know very well, sometimes being the only person in the room, it doesn't give you the voice. And it's really important that, that we have at least 2 in that room when decisions are being taken so that their voice can be properly taken care of and heard. I very much believe that we need to have equal representation in the workplace and equal representation in the VC world to ensure that when all of us, regardless of our gender, race, sexual orientation, or ability, when we enter those rooms, that we are heard and seen as individuals and appreciated as our full selves. I'm not a big fan of putting individual responsibility on people to deal with systemic problems. So I think what we shouldn't be doing is telling somebody, oh, you can do it, oh, everything's stacked against you. But, if you haven't done it, it's because you haven't worked hard enough.
Because there are some funds out there that have been started by founders of companies and wanted to pay it forward, setting up funds that are specifically, let's say, for female entrepreneurs or female entrepreneurs of colour. Like, how do you feel about those kind of funds or maybe incubators?
I think they're absolutely fantastic. One of the biggest privileges of this year was sharing the stage with Arlen Hamilton, who's the founder of Backstage Capital at Startup Grind Conference in London. And we at Google for Startups actually partner with Backstage Capital to support their efforts. One would say, I mean, quoting Ireland, the majority of existing funds serve white men. So let's create funds that serve the other communities. And we work with founders and with funds that focus solely on women, that focus solely on people of color. We collaborate with community organizations that support LGBTQI founders. And I think it completely makes sense in the same way that we arrive in a workplace and we want to find our tribe and our community that's going to lift us up and give us the confidence that we need, and especially as entrepreneurs, to have that confidence to get out of bed every day and go and challenge the world. Having supporters and friends in your company, but also on your board and as backers of your company is so incredibly important. Many compare the relationship of a startup founder and their VC as marriage. You get into that relationship, and for many years, they need to believe in you and support you. The more you can connect to them on a personal level, the better.
And that's fantastic advice. Is there any top extra tips that you have for those people that do have that challenge when they have to wake up every day and they know that the odds are stacked against them in getting that funding and getting those relationships, building those like professional marriages, right? Are there any tips that you would give diverse entrepreneurs in terms of how they go about their day-to-day, key planning ideas, anything extra?
I think it's a very tricky question to answer. We could probably have a whole conversation just about that, and it's very nuanced, and I don't want to give simplistic answers. I guess there are a few things that are quite important for me. One is that fortunately, finally, we've got some role models, fantastic entrepreneurs who are making the change and trailblazing, and that should give us all hope that the change and success is possible. Having said that, I'm not a big fan of putting individual responsibility on people to deal with systemic problems. So I think what we shouldn't be doing is telling somebody, oh, you can do it. Oh, everything's stacked against you. But, if you haven't done it, it's because you haven't worked hard enough. I think we need to be incredibly kind to those that come from underrepresented or underestimated groups, to give them that strength and encouragement and help them believe that success can happen. We know we've seen role models showing that success can happen, but also give them that kindness and that patience and understanding that life goes different ways sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose with that, I mean, with Google, are you involved in any of their diversity and inclusion efforts and programs and things like that?
I love that you asked that question because since I joined Google for Startups in December, and we started thinking about what we really want to build, diversity and inclusion and sustainability have become the big pillars of what we're building. And maybe to be able to properly answer that question, if I can tell you a little bit what Google for Startups is, it's essentially an arm of Google that Google very generously funds that exists to support and enable tech startups to succeed. And with that incredible privilege comes a fair bit of responsibility because, when you essentially got the funding from one of the largest, most successful companies in the world, and you have arguably the second most exciting, vibrant tech ecosystem in the world here in London and in the UK after Silicon Valley, then, who do you support and what do you do? And we have very much decided that what we want to do is we want to support companies that are in line with Google's values, but also that are building the world in which we want to live. And that world has equal representation. So we currently, this year, had a cohort of 10 incredible female founders. We had a cohort of companies that build profit with purpose organizations, and that is not NGO or charity. These are commercial organizations that are building products that are advancing the world and building the world in which we want to live. So an example would be Mendelian, who are using AI to speed up diagnosis of rare diseases, or Fibris that help non-medical professionals diagnose complex diseases such as pneumonia. We've got platforms that build data privacy, or platforms that remove bias from hiring, such as a fantastic company called Applied. So we're very much using that power that we have been given to support different groups, and diversity is at the core of all of this. I'm actually very proud to say that the two companies that raised most money this year from our cohorts are two female-founded companies. One is called Day, that raised 5.5 million from US and European investors, and the other one, Fibris, raised over $1 million. Both female founders. Incredible.
The thing that's very interesting about that is the difference between the cohorts. How do you come up with, I suppose, the difference between each of the ones, because there's 5 or 6, correct? And obviously you detailed some of them there. So how do you come to that idea of like what the next set of cohorts is going to look like?
So we thought about, what are we uniquely positioned to do? And I've got less than a year of experience at Google, but fortunately 13 years of experience in startups. So what I think I do relatively well is I think about, what is our unique selling point? What are we uniquely positioned to do? And obviously there is the incredible breadth of knowledge and resources from Google about Google's, best practices, connections, Google's people. When you think about how the wealth of experience that Google has amongst its employees, and how we can then use them to work with startups and provide them with their knowledge and experience. But again, because we've got the support of Google, we can work with companies that do sustainability. We can work with companies that are founded by diverse founders. We can also work with global companies. So probably the 3 cohorts that I'm really proud of this year was a residency cohort that used AI and ML for social good, a cohort of female founders, so 10 companies founded by women, and a cohort of African founders. So we had 10 founders from Africa come to the UK to bust that myth of the only good companies are, within the square mile of Old Street or, in Silicon Valley. And we had companies from all over Africa that have well over a million of customers that are going global, and we can help them do that.
And are you thinking about rolling out some more overseas, outside of the UK?
So this year has really been about going outside of London, which is also really important for us. We have to remember that when we're thinking about equal representation and creating opportunity, that opportunity also looks very different outside the M25. Startups from Africa and startups from Eastern Europe. And I'm super excited to be able to spend a little bit of time with the team at the end of the year and look at all the impact that we've made, and with that, be able to plan for all the exciting things to come next year. I'll tell you what my big dream is, and that dream is that a year from now, The Economist or Harvard Business Review write an article in which they say that companies that are founded by diverse founders and that are building products that are socially beneficial as well as commercially viable are better businesses that are bringing better financial results and are more attractive to invest in and to support.
Google for Startups, obviously, it's giving all this opportunity for so many people and, for the social good as well. But at the same time, at the end of the day, Google's a business. What's in it for Google? Is there a plan that hopefully they'd have a pick of some of the best, brightest minds and companies before anyone else? Is there another strand to this?
I think this is the piece that is almost most exciting, because when you think about it, when your company is large and successful as Google, then more people using the internet, more people using technology, healthier economy, more people using the digital economy, more companies growing and being successful. All of this is good for Google because Google is an ecosystem. So I'm actually very proud to say that, of course, we work with these companies that we pick and Google has access to them. But the very same way, especially when I get to have conversations like with yourself and mention all these companies to the world, I actually am very happy to say that I think we not only support these startups, we also give them a platform so that the whole world can know, so they all come and pitch. So it's not the startups pitching for money anymore. It's the companies coming to startups saying, we've heard about you. You're brilliant. How can we work with you?
Well, it's great just hearing about all these companies and obviously this great drive to make it as global as possible and find all this talent and companies and people from all around the world. And I think definitely, especially with all the challenges that's going on in the wider political sphere, that having that kind of diversity and getting this global inclusion is really important. Obviously, in Google Startups for UK, we've got Brexit coming. And yourself, as you say, you're a migrant entrepreneur. You're heading a company that has all this diverse talent from all over the world coming into it. Like, how are you viewing the impending Brexit deadline happening?
The same way that tech is ubiquitous and we all use it, we also indeed all live in the same political environment. You know, we watch the news the same way that you do or the startups do. So, you know, obviously there's this time of uncertainty. We're waiting to see what happens. But one thing I know for sure, especially in the case of startups, these are some of the hardest working, most motivated people. So obviously they're working equally hard to make sure that whatever happens, their businesses are in good place and they're ready.
There's also residency programs as well, correct? So could you walk us through a bit about that, and is that something that maybe is going to go to Asia, to Africa, around Europe? Or is that just a US thing?
Yeah. So the best thing about residency is that it's a global program. And Google for Startups Campus, which is our iconic building in Old Street that we've had since 2011, that played such an important part in the creation of tech ecosystem in London as we know it today. Campus in London was the first one, but we currently have 5 others around the world, and we've also announced opening the 6th one in Tokyo. So we've got campuses in London, Madrid, Warsaw, Tel Aviv, Sao Paulo, Seoul, and now Tokyo will be coming next. And residency is ran across all of these locations. So here in London, we said, because of the specificity of the local market, we double down on working with AI and machine learning startups that build social good. In Sao Paulo, for instance, they've really focused on working with companies that use voice assistant and voice technology. In Warsaw and in the CEE region, that's more gaming. So we actually have a big privilege, again, being part of a global organization, of obviously working with our local startups and with international Googlers, but also being able to exchange best practices between different campus locations and build residency program into that flagship program that we've got that really brings the best of Google to the startups.
What's really great is that it sounds like you're creating also an ecosystem around that in terms of like for the local area. So has there been, in terms of helping like in jobs boost wise from the residency, from the campuses, from the, you know, the areas that Google for Startups operating in, like let's say in London, has there been job creation out of that as well?
Oh, absolutely. So since the opening of campus here in London, the startups have created around 5,000 jobs, raised £250 million in funding. So we definitely see that there is, sort of going back to your question, what's in it for Google? We're seeing that return into the economy and into the ecosystem by way of jobs creation and companies growing. So I'm super excited to see at the end of this year, when the surveys come back from the startups in our ecosystem, what we've managed to do here. And not only here in campus locations, we also have 56 partners around the world, and these are VC organizations, community and co-working spaces, accelerators, and some of them absolutely incredible, such as we've got a partner in Gaza Sky Geeks, that is creating employment and teaching tech to the local ecosystem. We've got partners in Latin America, we've got partners in Africa. So all of them, essentially, this is our scale play to make sure that our impact reaches as far as it could.
What would you say for you over the next year? We talked about at the end of the year looking at the data and things like that, but what are some key milestones or stretches that you're hoping to reach, and in your mind of what you want to achieve with Google for Startups?
So I won't tell you sort of at the end of the year, but I'll tell you what my big dream is. And that dream is that a year from now, The Economist or Harvard Business Review write an article in which they say that companies that are founded by diverse founders and that are building products that are socially beneficial as well as commercially viable are better businesses that are bringing better financial results and are more attractive to invest in and to support. I think the more we can contribute to that trend of, it not only being about quotas, but actually it being about good business. And we already see more and more data that shows that, for instance, female-founded or female co-founded companies are more commercially attractive, that they bring returns to investors faster. The more data we can prove to the ecosystem, the sooner we're going to see that change that I want to be a part of come to fruition. So I'm really waiting to see that newspaper landing on the doorstep of every investor, and for them to see, okay, I'm going to think about where I spend my money now.
That's fantastic. Well, we've had such a wonderful chat today, and we've only got one more question left. So what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to your 21-year-old self, if you could?
At the risk of it sounding banal, believe in yourself. I have been incredibly fortunate to meet the right people along the way. I've also worked incredibly hard, but I think especially for those of us that don't come from an incredible amount of wealth and privilege, there has been this part of this voice in the back of my head, oh, you're just a little girl from Eastern Europe. I see now how far I've come. I see how much I owe it to my hard work and the support of people that I've met, and I think I really wish that all women and minorities that embark on their journey have their own back, because everything is going to be fine.
And you are a global change agent, but who would you say is yours?
I've mentioned Arlan Hamilton earlier. I think she's an incredible woman, and for those that don't know her, she is a queer black woman from Texas who went from homelessness to raising a fund that has to date supported over 130 companies around the world, started by diverse founders. I think she's the proof that we can be the change that we want to see in the world.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I'm afraid that's all that we've got time for. So you've been watching Global Change Agents. I'm Leanna Brinded. We'll see you next time.